Hi guys, and welcome to another video which I'm again shooting on location whilst over in Spain. I do spend quite a bit of my time over here because I do live over here for part of the year, and it's where I sort of kick back and reflect. I do still work whilst I'm out here, and I certainly do a bunch of presentations when I'm out here and shoot videos such as this, and these all relate to things that obviously I've had raised by clients or by people that have reached out to me when they've had a challenge. Now in one particular case I had somebody that reached out, asked a question, I responded, and then they queried the answer that I given them, and this related to outsourcing. They've been told a number of times that they should outsource, but they just don't feel they could afford it. Now the fact that I had to go back a second time but they were satisfied with the second response probably tells you I didn't explain myself very well the first time, so I hope I do better on this video than I did then. But I want to start off by giving you a couple of stories, one business related, one personal related, which I think really demonstrates why outsourcing is such an important thing that we should all consider wherever possible. Particularly if you're a solopreneur, as anybody that works by themselves is often referred to, and I am now one of those. But any small business where you haven't got sufficient expertise or need for an expertise to develop its own role in its own right. So we should always look at things of that nature. Unless you are a specialist in that particular area and it's your area of specialism, then you should be looking as to whether or not it is better outsourced. But anyway, here's the stories. And the first one, I say, affected my business. And when I came to set up the business success consultancy, I'd exited 3 businesses, and my last business I'd exited, I'd taken a bit of time out, so I was under no particular pressure to get things done by a certain date. So I wanted a logo for the business, and I thought, you know what, let's download some software. And I spent a few hours on that first bit of software trying to understand it and then trying to devise myself a logo. That wasn't very successful, so I then downloaded a second part of software, paid for that as well. Again spent a bunch of hours, probably in the total I spent probably about a day and a half, 2 days on this, and by the end of it I'd actually got zero actually result, because ultimately I was not happy with anything that I produced to that point. In fact, it was quite frustrated. And on that night of the second day, I remember sitting down in the evening with my partner, and she was watching Coronation Street. Now it's not my particular cup of tea. If it's yours, you know, great, but it's not mine. So I was on social media and I looked through, and somebody had recommended an application called Fiverr. I looked into it, I checked it out, and for those of you that don't know, it's basically $5. Well, it's from $5 you can secure the services of a bunch of specialist professional people. They might be artists, they might be voiceover artists, they can do there's all manner of different services on there. You'll need to check it out. But one of those areas you can certainly go and get covered is your logo and any images. So I dropped on there, reviewed a couple of 5-star rated individuals and chose one and sent them off a brief. Did all of this within half an hour. Now the situation is that within 24 hours I got a couple of designs back. One I really liked, that I sent a note off, and so at the time it was just $5. I think now it's $5, and you pay an administration fee of $1 as well, so it would cost you $6. But for less than £5, I'd secured and got my logo completely done, and it took me just half an hour from actually jumping on, downloading the application, reviewing a few possibilities, sending it all off. I mean, against the 2 days that I'd spent wasting time, and I could have spent that 2 days being far more effective and doing some stuff that might have led to generation of capital and revenue into the business. So that's the first example. The second example actually happened around about 25 years ago, showing my age a little bit there, when in actual fact I'd taken on a property project and essentially needed an awful lot of work with this property, and to the point where I'd actually taken down some lath and plaster walls. For those of you that know, it's sort of plaster over little pieces of wood. If you don't know anything about it, don't worry unless you're interested. But basically I then put this plasterboard back up on the walls, and then I needed to just plaster and skim over the top. Like with every job that I was doing at the time, I thought, oh, that'll be no problem at all. So I then set about looking into how to go and do it. So one Friday night I sort of jumped onto the books, because of course the internet wasn't as prevalent then, and I looked at all my research about bonding, about the top coat and everything else, about the how the techniques in terms of the float and all this sort of stuff. And I remember being told at the time by a friend that I think had called me that evening that I'd just be better off leaving it off to the professionals, but no, I knew better. And so the next morning, Saturday, I bright and early got up to the DIY store, bought all my stuff, loaded the car up, came back, no doubt had a coffee as I normally do before I start any job, and then got into it and mixed some plaster. Got up to the walls, and I remember getting to the walls and basically the plaster had set. My float, which was in the plaster, had set solid into the bucket. I tried to go and get this plaster out. The bucket split. Frustratingly, I had to go back up to the DIY store, get a new bucket. I then come up to then get back again, think it's not going to happen this time. I'm going to make it really loose, the mix. Came up within a matter of minutes of getting starting to get it onto, or seconds of trying to get it onto the walls. It started to set again. I want to cut to the chase here. Mid-afternoon on the Sunday, I got to the stage where I'd actually virtually used everything, all the plaster that I got, even though I got enough to go and do the two walls. I had done nowhere near the two rooms. I had nowhere near the two rooms. I decorated the floor as much as I decorated the walls. My partner walked in at the time and said, "This isn't working, we need to call a professional." And to be honest with you, at that stage, I'd had enough and I was absolutely minded to do so. Calling a professional, and a few days later came out to go and quote. Apart from the fact that I caused more trouble than it was worth, because he turned around and said I need to take some of the plaster off the walls because I'd got it on too thick. In actual fact, what I did, I cheated. I extended the skirting boards, which actually meant my two rooms were probably a couple of inches smaller than they should have been. But that aside, anyway, the point was that when he came through with his quote, I realised, because I was in a bonus environment at the time, I was employed and I got a basic and I got a bonus, and I worked it out that if I'd have been worked on that Saturday morning for 2 to 3 hours, I would have earned enough money to pay for that plaster to come in. I wouldn't have had the problem with my Friday evening taken up in terms of research. I wouldn't have had all the wasted expense of trying to get all the tools and all the necessary materials, which ended up being wasted anyway. I wouldn't have spent all that time in terms of doing it. I could have just basically cracked on and enjoyed my weekend, meanwhile just having worked 2 or 3 hours just to make that money back. So it's that sort of moment that I realised that sometimes it's better just to call in the professionals, and this is exactly the same in terms of your business. In your business, you are the person that has an expertise that should be, no doubt, a technician probably quite often is how we start off, and therefore you can generate far more revenue by outsourcing to professionals. I mean, for example, one particular thing that we do quite often as business owners, we do our own accounts. Now, an accountant, I know how to do my accounts. I worked in accountants as my first job, actually, having left school. I realised accountancy wasn't for me, if I'm being honest with you. And so whilst I can do it, I can do Sage, I can use Sage, I know how it works, I absolutely do not want to do it. It doesn't interest me. It takes me a lot longer, because I don't do it that often, to actually go and do. Instead, I outsource it to a bookkeeper, which cost me about £20 a month to actually go and do that. In actual fact, I did a little bit of a review recently in terms of outsourcing, and I actually realised that on an average, on a monthly basis, I employ 6 people a month to do various tasks, from voiceovers to images to my bookkeeping, at a cost of £90 a month. But it saves me around about a week in terms of time. So when I did that analysis, so if you can't basically in a week earn more than £90, then if I can't earn that, then there's a bit of a problem in my business. And you're have similar sort of issues within your business and similar opportunities to outsource, I have no doubt. There are so many different providers out there that are so reasonable. So for example, if you want captions on a video, which you're seeing now on this video, rev.com costs you $1 per minute. I've mentioned Fiverr already, and I've mentioned about the bookkeeper. There are people per hour. There are so many people out there that you can employ at very low relative cost. They're far better at doing certain tasks than you will be, and it leaves you to have the time to go and do what you do best and generate more revenue for your business. So I hope that's given you my take on why outsourcing is so important for businesses, and I hope that gives you something to think about if you're not already outsourcing in your business. Until the next time, goodbye.